And we are live.
Hey.
Welcome to A Nice Place to Brew. I'm Jason.
And I'm George.
And with us, of course, is Paulie. And tonight, we are happy to welcome back to A Nice Place to Brew, FOBAB Hall of Fame member from Alesong Brewing out of California, Mr. Matt Von Wick. How are you, sir?
I'm good, except I'm in Oregon, not California. That's okay. Same thing. West Coast.
Strike one. Gosh. Strike number one.
Yeah. Oh, that was early. That was bad.
That's okay.
It's all right. Yeah. So how you guys doing?
All right. Good.
I'm good.
All right.
Today is Thursday, February 4th. We do our webcast every Thursday. That's available on Facebook and YouTube under our name, A Nice Place to Brew. We have an audio podcast under the same name, A Nice Place to Brew, that's available on all the podcasting platforms. Our website is www.aniceplacetobrew.com. And our social media links are all over the place at A Nice Place to Brew and Nice Place to Brew. Matt, Alesong. Do you have a website and social media links you want to throw out?
Yep. Alesongbrewing.com is our website. All of our information and more is there. And then social media networks are Alesong Brewing. And then I appear sometimes as Alesong Matt on Instagram and Twitter.
Right on. Right on.
Right.
Well, I'm really glad you were able to come back. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm still working now, and this is work, right? Talking to you guys. So here we go. Finish the day.
Hopefully not too much work.
No, it's not hard work. But a lot of my work. A lot of my work isn't that hard.
when you get to raise a glass and say cheers. Yes, exactly.
That's right.
Speaking of which, what are we drinking tonight?
I have a nice light wheat beer from a local brewery. I have a couple more beers to go tonight, and so I thought this is my first one of the day, so I thought I'd start with something at about 4.5 or 5% wheat
Okay.
beer.
All right. Good choice. What about you, George?
Well, I went a slightly different direction. Mine's 13.5% from Commonwealth Brewing, and we talked briefly about this during our adjunct episode last week. But it is a double barrel aged imperial stout with Blanchard's coffee, cinnamon, dulce de leche, cacao nibs, and Ghirardelli dark chocolate.
Okay,
So,
I have lots of questions on this, and I think Matt's the man to answer them.
Yeah. But I am lacking a church key, so I got to go fix that. I'll be right back.
Okay. Paulie, what about you, sir? What are you drinking tonight?
Oh, someone unmute him.
My bad. I'm drinking my black IPA right here that I just released today. I'm excited about that. And then also I want to show this. We just started carrying this Untitled Art. It's got all these crazy seltzers. They're freaking amazing. I mean, right here, this is a prickly pear. I can guarantee when I pour it, it's going to be pink. Not clear like most seltzers are. So if you can find it, go ahead and get it out there at your local craft beer store.
Right on. Right on.
Okay, and one more, I was going to say person, but that's not entirely accurate, although dogs are people too, are going to be drinking tonight. Tonight, the Corgis will be trying Bush Dog Brew, which I can't really get it. There you go. Dog Brew.
Yeah.
Which apparently is basically pork bone broth, so I'm pretty sure they're going to like it, but we'll do that a little bit later.
I'm so impressed and yet still somewhat surprised that it took one of the beer companies this long to start marketing to pets. Am I wrong? You know?
No, you're not.
You're not, yeah.
Especially because I think George's description is of bone broth, I think is right on from what I remember reading about it.
Yeah, it's pork bone broth. Intended for dogs only. So humans should not drink that.
Good advice. I'm not signing up for that. Instead, I am drinking a Bam Bam Loves Pebbles wheat ale from our good friends at Will County Brewing Company out of Shorewood, Illinois. Their brew house manager, Mr. Joel Rakowski, of course, is a past guest here on A Nice Place to Brew, and we are big fans. So, cheers to JBG Breweries out there.
Cheers to El Presidente.
And I gotta tell you, like this beer is really solid. I mean,
Yeah.
really. I mean, it's. I mean, the wheat beer is a good base beer, for to play around with, special mashes and adjuncts and things like that, and that's exactly what this is. The fruit flavor comes through very nicely without overwhelming the beer. I think it's spot on.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because on one side of the country we have Matt, who of course is enjoying a light-bodied wheat beer as well, and on the east coast of the country we went for double barrel aged, straight up, give me alcohol. So I guess that's what the difference of 3 hours makes, right?
Yeah, and I'm driving for a good amount of time tomorrow, so I'm looking to get a good night's sleep. My father-in-law made a pot roast for dinner, so I'm gonna eat. I ate that. I'm gonna drink this, and I'm gonna
You're
sleep
gonna
like a baby
zonked.
tonight.
Right on. Okay, so I have a real newbie question for Matt and George. You set it up perfectly with that beer that you're enjoying tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Double barrel aged. What's the logic, and what do you hope to achieve with the second aging?
That's a good question, because I'm seeing more and more people do it. In fact, we have a collaboration going right now with Deschutes that's going to be in double barrels, and we have one we're making ourselves, which we're going to go double barrels. And part of it, I'll be honest, is marketing. It's like the DDH thing. Like people dry hopped things twice all the time. I've been a brewer for 20 years, and that's always happened. But now you put a DDH on your can or a TDH, and you're like, whoa, I got to have it because it's got more. And so there is an element of marketing to the double barrel. But at the same time, there is something to the flavor, too. You're all barrel aging, I truly believe, is just layering on flavors. You're getting, so especially when you're talking spirits barrel aged stuff, because you're just layering on more flavors. The same thing that adjuncts do to big beers like that, barrels also give that. And so you want a little bourbon character, you want a little port barrel character, maybe you get some maple barrels, you get that. Now you could do the same thing, and some do, by aging it in two different barrels and then doing a little blend situation after. So the single beer didn't spend time in two barrels, but you've got two different barrels coming together. So I don't know how people are normally doing it, but if you really want to say it was barreled twice, you have to move it from one to the other. But anyway, that's the thing. Add more flavors.
Is there a time rule around that? Like, in order to, well, I mean, to your point, it's mostly marketing more than anything else. So
it is a lot. Yeah, it is a lot to say that it is. It builds up a lot of marketing cred, but at the same time, as far as your question on time, it depends on what it is, what the beer is, what the barrel is, how new they are, and that only comes just by tasting. And I've been helping Paulie a little bit on some barrel stuff he's got going, which, by the way, since I've talked to you guys last, Paulie became a professional brewer, which, you say, hey, what's new? Oh, Paulie became a brewer. It's awesome. But, I told him, I said that there is no real rules of thumb. We leave certain beers in barrels for a year. That's, I guess, our rule of thumb. But most of the time, you just have to say, well, I'm going to try it after 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and just see where it's at. If it's ready, serve it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, last week, was it last week, or it was recently, Paulie had to do a pitch during the show, so we put him up on the big screen and we did color commentary while he did it. So
nice.
That was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to go back and watch that part. Luckily, tomorrow is going to be an easy day for me, so I think I'll go back and watch last week's, the beginning of last week's episode.
George and I were playing the part of sports broadcasters, basically.
Nice. Oh yeah.
just calling out just every individual movement.
He's got to be happy with that one.
It was, Paulie, I think you'll appreciate it.
All right, I'll make sure I watch that tomorrow.
Nice.
So let's talk a little bit, Paulie, if we can, since we just mentioned about your barrel project. What's been done so far? What's the latest, and how you feeling about it?
I'm still. I got my Cabernet barrel is full. It wasn't. I thought it was. I feel I started with the whole swelling of it, and then it was swelled up a little bit, and then all of a sudden I needed my Jason. You're about the only one to understand that I needed my kiddie pool back for other brewing purposes. All right, George, I only have one floor drain. I have a trench drain here at the brewery, so I got one floor drain in the middle. So we took a Paw Patrol kiddie pool, like one of the ones that are like 6 inches tall, and we cut a hole out in the middle of it. We put it right over the floor drain, and so all my cleaning is done in the said kiddie pool.
Just to concentrate the water and just fill it in a smaller space.
Yeah, but it still gets out every goddamn place. I mean, let's be
It's
real.
weird, but when I saw it, it took me within like 2 minutes. I was like, I totally get why you're doing that.
Yeah. And so then I kind of abandoned the project for a minute. I just left the beer in there. And then when I got back to it, I filled back up. It seemed all right. I only filled halfway because at the time only the bottom was leaking. But then once I started filling, it started leaking like a sieve again. But then about a week later, now it's completely sealed up. I luckily just brewed that beer last week, so I'm just going to top it off with the blend of what's left in there. Do you see a problem with that, Matt?
No, not at all. I think, if you like what's going in, if it's the same beer, obviously, then that's okay. And I think one of the biggest things that you need to do with a beer like that is just make sure, some people top off all the time. Some people don't like to do that. They want to keep it all bunged up. But oxygen's going to get in there regardless. And part of barrel aging is that micro-oxygenation, the aging of bourbon barrel-aged beers, or sort of the souring of wild beers. And so you want some oxygen, but not too much, because then it's going to start making some nasty things. And so topping up's a good idea, because then you just got less chance for oxygen to get in.
Yeah. So did that, and actually my owners, because they're really excited about the apparel projects now, they gave me the green light to start ordering more, because now, Jason, you saw that other room, how we finish off that room?
Yes.
It's going to be the game room now, which now, as of this week, it's an official game room. We have golden tea in there. We have a pinball machine in there. We have dartboard in there, a jukebox, and then like 4 gambling machines. So it's a nice little fun room in there.
When you said game room, I thought it was going to go a different direction, but now I'm more excited because I love pinball, and that was part of what you just said. So I'm in.
So there is an empty wall in that room that they were. It's kind of cool because it's a common wall with the brew house right over here by the tanks right next to me.
Right.
And so we had one of the local artists who teaches at high school art. He's done some work here, and he did 3 little mini murals. And what he did is he boxed out the window, and he made it look like you're looking through a window of the brewery. So you see my 4 fermenters, and then one wall. He's got the mural that you guys can see behind me. He's got that on the wall. My brew stand over here, we shifted it down so it's looking like you're looking straight into my brew house from there.
Huh.
That's awesome. I love that they did that.
And
Yeah,
I thought it
cool.
was really cool because I was looking at it, the artist was asking me for suggestions and stuff like that, like little bits and pieces. Like I noticed, like he had the handles on the valves and everything. I'm like, all right, you see how that valve's perpendicular with it? Do nothing. That's parallel with it. Put a hose down there. That means there's a hose coming down into my bucket for my blow off. So do all that little stuff. It was actually kind of fun to help be a part of that. So that being said, my owner said I get to have that wall. I'm gonna be. That's where my barrel collection is gonna be. So I probably got, I don't know, 30-foot span that I can put barrels down. So probably 10, 20 barrels in there. So slowly, but I was just on the horn the other day with one of the barrel front companies. I think my next barrel I'm going to buy is a Rittenhouse Rye whiskey one.
So that's right where I wanted to go. So what kind of ideas do you have right now for next barrel projects?
I think the next one I'm going to do, after looking at the barrel projects, I'm going to do that Rittenhouse Rye, because it's like I can get, like when I looked at all the barrels, like the stuff that I'm interested in, there's like Rittenhouse, Evan Williams, Elijah Craig, but then they had some crazy funky rum barrels. But like talking to the owners about that, I'm like, well, we do a rum barrel, but now I got to figure out what I would blend with the rum barrel. That'd be a good question to ask Matt. You can carry on later. But yeah, right now I'm just going to do a Imperial Stout and a rye barrel. That's my next project coming up, moving forward. And it's kind of cool because I was looking at the website. All these things are guaranteed to be wet. They'll tell you the day they were dumped, and they guarantee to have 10 to 12 ounces of spirits still in there, wherever spirit you have.
Nice.
Okay. Okay.
So Matt, that actually raises a decent question for me. Is that I've had really good ones, like barrel aged beers. I think we talked about last time. Not my usual go to, but I've had good ones that are whiskey barrels, rum barrels, wine barrels. I have never had a good one that was a beer aged in a gin barrel. Have you successfully done that? And if so, with what kind?
So there aren't a lot of gin barrels because much gin is in stainless steel. But
Okay.
we have had good success with it out here in Oregon because there's some small distillers who are making some gins. And there's one that's just a little bit southwest of Portland. It's called Ransom Spirits. And they make an Old Tom gin. And it's a little darker in color, which I think Old Tom gins historically were aged in barrels, and their sort of botanicals are a little bit different. But they make it, and we've put several things in it, including an IPA. We put our Saison in it, which works pretty well. We've got a beer out right now called French 75. It's inspired by the cocktail. That's aged. It's a farmhouse ale aged in these gin barrels, and then we add lemon zest to it, and we add up the carbonation a little bit because typically it's served with sparkling wine or champagne, so we wanted it to be real effervescent and fizzy. So it's real nice. But I tell you, the times when it hasn't worked or things I haven't liked has been there just wasn't enough gin character. So I think it depends on where you get them from, really.
So the idea of having an IPA from a gin barrel is very interesting. I'm trying to think of what that flavor combination would feel like on the palate.
You know, a lot of the things in gin, I mean, the botanicals are often heavy juniper, but you've also got citrus peel like orange and maybe lemon. And you got coriander, which is kind of citrusy. Maybe you have cardamom too. But you can pick some hop character that kind of mimics some of those same hop flavors and hop aromas. And then you can choose to dry hop it afterwards. But that all depends on how much gin character you get. You don't want to over hop it and not have gin stuff come out. Needless to say, we didn't make it again, partly because when you put IPAs in a barrel and you know you're oxidizing the beer, a hoppy beer is going to taste more oxidized. And so you have to get past some of that sort of aged IPA flavor. So, but farmhouse ale, Saison type beers work great.
Yeah, and the other thing with doing an IPA like that is I would be afraid that there would be too much like herbal botanical flavor because you're getting it both from the hops as well as from the gin character.
Yeah,
correct?
It could be kind of overload a little bit as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So you raised a point about oxidation earlier on, and I think it's a good one. I remember from earlier conversations on this subject that the oxygen level is one of the reasons why the highest ABV beers are the most ideal for barrel aging. Is that still an accurate statement? And if so, can you add a little context to that?
Yeah, I think so. And, you know, part of it is, you know, when you have a high alcohol beer, barley wine, a quad, imperial stouts, they're often hot and a little boozy just from the alcohol content that you put in there. And then, of course, when you add bourbon barrel to the equation, you've got more of a boozy sort of character. And usually what happens is if you drink vintages of beer or beer that's been aged properly in your cellar, things tend to round out, kind of get, you know, positively aged and positively oxidized. And by that, I mean, it's just some of that booziness has worn away. Some of the flavors have melded together. And some of the oxidation flavors where you might think like papery or cardboardy or something like that, if it's not too much, kind of help the complexities of the beer. And so I think some of the micro-oxygenation that happens in a barrel aging beer sort of, helps to smooth it out, round it out, and make those flavors come together a little bit more. It's sort of like when someone's, you know, you read a rating on a beer on one of the rating sites and they're like, oh, this is great now, but it needs another year. And we're saying, well, why does it need another year? Well, yeah, because that age brings out a little mellowness and smoothness. And I think oxidation plays a good role in that. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. That's very well said. I can say also because I'm now kind of like my brain's going back to Bourbon County from Goose Island here in the Midwest, and as everybody knows, I mean, Bourbon County is widely recognized. It's become a bit of a pastime here in the Midwest, and also it's become kind of a point of trade among craft beer people because anytime with every variety that comes out for each year, they end up either getting drank or they end up getting traded around, and every year there's different adjuncts, but certainly one of the things that come up in those conversations is what year all of it is from, and the taste differences year to year vary considerably, not only from the batches that they're doing, but just as those flavors evolve. And just to draw kind of a poor comparison to that, like I noticed that on my home brew to my own, in my own way, just because when beer is first, get thrown in a keg, that first pour off is usually different than it is 2 months later. So I do think there's kind of a lifeline, so to speak, of beers in different ways.
Yeah, and you know what else? It also depends on whose beer you're drinking. Polly's been in several breweries where they've had different packaging operations, whether it be Flossmoor Station or anywhere else he's helped out or worked at, and everyone's system is a little different. Goose Island's got a state-of-the-art bottling line, which probably has very little oxygen in the package, and that beer should hold up to oxidation a lot longer than someone who's using a little Maheen or a counter pressure homemade. A lot of small breweries use like homemade stuff and they work, but that beer is going to be maybe a little more off in a year or 2 years. So, and your home brew goes the same way, right? What kind of things you do it on, and bottle conditioning depends versus counter pressure fill and all that stuff.
Yep.
So,
yeah, very true. One thing that I'm curious about, is there best practices around leaking in terms of barrels?
Taking a leak?
No. Like seepage, just any just liquids coming out. I heard Paulie mention that.
Yeah. He was talking about swelling them up, and I talked to him a little bit about this too. And your barrels are going to leak. You need to have some drainage. You need to be ready to use the mop, that sort of thing. I'll come back to a story about when I was the brewer at Flossmoor Station too, and a real mess I had to clean up. But one of the things is swelling your barrels, and you can do that with water. But then you're worried about rinsing whatever was in the barrel, like swelling with water. When you have a bourbon barrel, like Paulie was mentioning, you get a barrel that's got 10 ounces of high octane bourbon in it. You don't want to rinse that out. But we have a steamer, and so we can just stick the wand of a steamer in there and run it for a while, and that hot steam helps swell the barrels. We've done things before where I'll set the barrels on their end and just keep water on the outside of the head, and it helps swell the head a little bit. But then you've got different techniques, like they make wax to seal up little leaks. They make there's tricks with toothpicks and garlic, and there's all kinds of sort of little tricks and tips that people have done just to seal up things that are dripping a little bit. But
sure.
All in all, if you get good barrels, they're going to eventually swell up. Just like Paulie was saying, is that over time, it eventually swelled up. That stuff soaks into there. I only mentioned that Flossmoor Station experience because I was in a similar situation to Paulie when I was the brewer there in Flossmoor, and I only had so much space for barrels, only so many barrels I could fit. And I had like a dozen downstairs, and I was leaving for the day. I lived a half hour away. So I called my wife and said, I'll be home. I'm just going to go shut the lights off downstairs. Went downstairs, and all of a sudden I saw some black liquid on the floor. I'm like, oh, what happened down here? And there's only one little round floor drain. It's not like there's a trench drain or anything like that. What had happened is a bung was in too hard to a stout or a brown ale or a porter that I put cherries in. Probably some re-fermentation in that barrel. And instead of the bung popping out, because I didn't have a soft bung, it blew the head out. So all 60 gallons were on the ground, in and around, under the stacks, all over. So I called my wife real quick and said, I'll be a couple more hours. I've got some mopping to do. So that wasn't a leak. It was a straight on blowout. And I lost 60 gallons of beer.
That's no good.
Yeah, no good.
Oh,
That's
So
rough.
don't put bungs in too tight. Put a fermentation bung in it and let some pressure out.
Okay. Oh wow.
So you started off as a home brewer, right, Matt?
Yeah, for a little bit, I was in Naperville, Illinois, home brewing, maybe like 10, 15 batches until I got my first professional job.
Okay.
So not for very long.
Okay. Any suggestions for a home brewer on if they're using spirals or chips or cubes or anything like that? Since not all of us have access to nor want to make enough beer to fill a barrel, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think they work great, and you can do some fun things with them, especially because you can just soak those spirals or chips or whatever product you have, and they have a lot of good ones out there. But you can soak them in whatever you want. You can soak them for as long as you want, just to pick up some spirit character. And sometimes you might overdo it. I'm sure a little goes a long way. But the best thing too is you can experiment a lot, because when you put beer in a barrel, you have to realize, well, that's what's coming out is my 60 gallons I put in there. You feel like I can't lose this. If you have a 5-gallon system or a 10-gallon system or somewhere in that nature, you can line up your carboys and have 6 different things with 6 different oak products and soaked in different liquors, and you can just have fun doing that. And then you can blend them all together after the fact too. So I'm kind of jealous sometimes small systems versus something where you're making bigger, because you can just do a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Jason and I, when we were trying to make was Pollyanna around when you were here?
Yes.
I know the owner of that, but I don't think they had started up by the time I took off.
Okay, they made a beer called Orenda, which Jason and I both kind of fell in love with. So it was a quad with aged in white. Was it red wine? Red wine barrels.
Yep.
Yeah, red wine barrels. So we basically were fixing to make a clone of that. So we made. Did we use our triple or did we make a quad on that? Do you remember?
It was a triple.
We used our triple. Okay, so we used our triple. And then we soaked a spiral in a thermos filled with red wine, and then dropped that in for a little bit. And we didn't get a ton of color out of it, but we did get a lot of really good flavor, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was quite nice.
Yeah.
Did the spiral pick up much color itself once you took it out of the wine? Was it soaked pretty well, or?
I think it was because you left it in there for like a week, right, Jason?
I think it was a week, yeah. And I'm thinking of this too. Didn't we use the oven to sanitize those?
Yeah, before we put it into the red wine, we actually stuck it in the oven for a little bit to sanitize the spiral, and then we stuck it in the red wine to absorb that flavor and character. So we read that somewhere, and it seemed like a good idea. So
what do you think? Are we crazy?
No, I think it's a good idea. And what's interesting too, I just thought about this while you were talking about it, because you talked about wine, is not a lot of brewers who brew on a big scale probably use spirals because we have so much access to barrels. But I think winemakers do it all the time as they're trying to adjust their tannin level and stuff. And so, in fact, you can find a lot of sort of wine websites that are just for adding oak to their product. And so I think some brewers are going into that sort of wine world to find some of those products. And they have huge amounts too. They'll take staves and put them in a bag so they're easy to get in and out of tanks and stuff. So it's not unheard of for professionals to use the same thing.
Yeah, I do remember when we took the spiral out and put it into the secondary, we thought, well, man, wasting all this wine is a waste. So we poured a glass of it. It was the oakiest red wine you would ever hope to try.
We've actually got some barrels that are new oak now that we've never done that before. They've always been, from the winery or whatever, and oak neutral. And so we got brand new built barrels, and we know that they're going to overpower beers, but we're going to use it as a blend to be able to blend in a little more oak character. We've just put them in a couple months ago, so we don't really know how it's turned out yet, but it'll be fun to play with that similarly to a winemaker does, because most of our barrels have been used for 3-4 turns or something. So,
okay. Yeah, and so when you say 3-4 turns, that just means the number of batches you put in the barrel, right?
That winemakers have put in there. Yeah. So
Oh,
I
that
think
wine. Okay.
yeah. So most barrels that brewers get their hands on, as far as wine barrels, are often called oak neutral, at least by the winemaker. And they've decided they've extracted all the tannins they're going to get out of it. Now, with beer, you do still pick up some depending on how long you age that product in the beer in the barrels. But there's certainly not as much. And I think wineries have all the different ages of barrels in their cellar, where they've got some brand new stuff, some 1 year used stuff, 2 years, 3 years, and then they'll do some blends depending on whatever wine they're making and the tannin level they need. And so it'll be fun for us to be able to do that too, and add kind of oak character to our blends.
This is the first time.
Okay. Is there a term for how many times you've used the barrel for batches of beer? Because I know you can use the same barrel multiple times. It just takes longer. So that's what I thought you were saying when you were saying turns, but that was something else.
Right. Well, same thing too, because we do reuse ours. So it's sort of the turns that the winemaker used it, and the number of times that we used it. It just depends. With our wine barrels, we'll just keep on using them for new beers. Again, we have that steamer, and so we can totally sterilize a barrel if we choose to, or we can keep kind of the flora in there that we want and let it inoculate the next beer.
But each time you use a barrel, doesn't it take longer and longer to impart that flavor and character to the beer?
It does if you're trying to get the flavor from the barrel or the spirit or alcohol that was in it. So bourbon barrels, rum barrels, any of those spirits, every time you use it, you've taken some of that flavor out, right? And so you use it again, it's going to take longer, or you're just not going to get the same impact. Wine barrels, we don't use them in that same way. We use wine barrels simply as little tiny houses for microorganisms. Yeah, you might get some tannin character. You might possibly get some wine character, but like your experiment with the spirals, you just don't pick up this. It's not like it tastes like a big glass of Merlot when you drink that beer. You might get some fruitiness out of it or whatever. So we're not using it to get barrel character per se. We're using it to house the organisms for Brett and lactobacillus character. That's not to say that someone who's making a clean beer, a non-sour beer and wine barrels, isn't going to get some barrel character from that. But you're right. The more it's used by whomever, it's going to take longer because those flavors have been extracted by whatever liquid was in there previously.
Jason, it sounds like we're going to have to invite Mac back for your favorite episode we're going to do, which would be our sour episode. It seems like he has some experience with that.
Yeah,
he does.
It's actually really,
he's in the
2020
OBAB Hall of Fame for a sour, I see.
For a sour, okay. Yeah, yes. See? We'll get you to turn around on this, Jason.
George has made it a quest that he's going to win me over to sour beers, and I'm not quite there yet. But
Jason, did you at least try
I'll say I'm open to it.
Jason, did you try sour down here when you were here last time?
No.
Oh.
I'm not religious, but I am evangelizing on this point for Jason.
Yeah. Well, I remember George not too long ago was not won over by the sours either, and he's taken quite a turn.
I have, but I think that that's in large part because so did the industry. A couple years ago, and Matt, you can tell me if you think I'm crazy for this, but a lot of sour beers were not good. They were that, early IPA thing of just punch you in the face with bitterness. In this case, it was punch you in the face with sourness. And I think the industry has really matured, and now you're getting a lot of really good complexity of flavor and tartness that we just didn't see before.
Yeah, I think that's a true statement. I think also that's sort of true of the whole craft beer industry. Because I've been in this for 20 years now, I've seen a lot of changes, of course, from, 1,000, 1,500 breweries in the whole country now up to 8,000 or whatever we've got now. I don't even know because of COVID. But part of that reason is just what you said. People are making better beer. That's why there's more breweries. And that's why more people are getting into craft beer because it's not kind of like there used to be a time back when I got into it, late 90s, early 2000s, where it's like if you were making good beer, you were like, geez, I hate that one brewery over there because they're making us all look bad with that crappy infected stuff they're putting out. And same thing went with sour beers. If people were just going to overpower you with sourness and be one dimensional or just, the crazy thing is when people would make a beer that was infected with something on accident and go, it's a Belgian beer. And it didn't represent a lambic. It didn't represent a Flanders red. It was just like, oh, you had a beer go bad and you called it Belgian.
Yeah, the other go-to there was a Berliner. They would be like, "Oh, it's a Berliner." No.
You're like, wait a minute. Yeah, but the quality is much better. You're right. There's so many good sour beer producers out there that you can find good stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
You guys won an award at the 2020 FOBAB for a sour too. It's called Touch of Brett.
Not for a sour, and that's it was a Brett beer. It was in the Brett beer category, and Brettanomyces doesn't make beer sour.
It's a little different.
Yep, Brettanomyces is just a yeast. Now there are some acids involved, and typically they're in beers that have lactobacillus or pediococcus. So most of the time when someone says Brett beer, you think, oh, it's a sour beer, because it could be. So it was a Brett Saison, and so that category that we won gold in was you had Brett only. You couldn't have lactobacillus in it.
So that's a good point, Matt. Though is to a lot of people, Brett means sour. So what is Brett when it's not paired with sour? Like what
it's
character?
Simply a yeast.
Okay.
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I knew where you're going.
Yep.
I got a lot to say about this.
Please
there's
do.
There's a lot of misconceptions, and it has to do partly with so many people making and drinking sour styles of beer because they just want to say, and you guys said it, and I sometimes find myself making the mistake too. If we lump them all in sours, anything besides a Saccharomyces fermented beer, we say it's a sour, and that doesn't do justice to the beers that are being made, right? Because you could have a lightly tart Berliner Weiss up to a pull the enamel off your teeth, mixed culture sour beer out of an oak barrel, and there's just everything in between. And even the misconception of Brettanomyces in a beer making it sour is wrong. So to your point, Brettanomyces is a yeast. Now, it can be killed, so you don't have to be afraid of it. Some people are like, don't bring Brettanomyces in my brewery. It can be killed. If you have good CIP practices and know what you're doing and aren't being lazy, you'll kill it just like Saccharomyces. Now, what it does do, if you don't have good CIP practices and you do get it into other yeast or other tanks that shouldn't, it keeps eating sugars that normal Saccharomyces wouldn't. So typically Brett beers are much drier. They can and usually do go down to zero, like no sugar left to eat it.
Okay.
Or they'll eat most of it and just leave it pretty dry. So that's, you see them a lot of times in Saisons because that's a very dry style of beer without much residual sweetness. Other flavors that they produce are very fruity, tropical, sort of, pineapple mango flavors, maybe right there, or whatever.
Polly's truck.
Yeah,
it's Polly's truck. Yeah, no, it's not.
No?
Oh, okay.
He'll be back.
Yeah.
Sorry, wrong button. No, that's prickly pear guava.
Oh, nice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Seltzer I was just telling about.
Oh, nice. That's a seltzer. Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, it's this new
cloudy seltzer.
Well, it's got a bunch of puree fruit stuff in there.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
I mean, this ain't no traditional seltzer. I'll tell you why. It was funny because a good friend of mine, he works for AJ Maca, who they're the ones distributing most of this, all the 450 stuff, all the sexy stuff that you're seeing on the market here, like 450, the milkshake bullshit, the slushy bullshit. All that
yeah, Polly.
He's got opinions. Yeah,
I'm with him 100%. He and I
are you? Yeah.
You think that? Yeah.
Although I'm against it, but I'm brewing one next week. Unfortunately.
Well, until you own the company, you just got to do what they want.
Yep. Well, I'm just doing it for the whole. For me personally, it's just more experience. Just like when I learned, this is really a seltzer, and this tastes amazing. I want to make this. I don't want to make some clear-looking freaking malt beverage bullshit like fucking truly or the claw is. I mean,
Matt, you had said Brett, because you're right. I mean, one of the concerns with Brett is once it's in, it's in.
Yeah.
And I think if you're dealing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if you're dealing with plastic, like a bucket fermentation system and things, that's more likely to be true than if you're dealing with like steel or glass in your fermentation.
It's harder to clean. I don't know that it's impossible, but I'll tell you, one of the reasons I was getting on my high horse there telling you that Brett shouldn't be feared is we use Brettanomyces and Lactobacillus in all of our tanks. If you go on our website, alesongbrewing.com, you'll see that we make clean imperial stouts, bourbon barrel aged, not intended to be sour, and we make very sour fruited beers with all kinds of these bugs and things. But we know how to clean our tanks. We take all the soft parts, any door gasket, any gaskets between the valves themselves. We have different ones for the clean program and different ones for the wild program. Because those rubber parts are porous, and we also boil our stuff that we can fit in our little homebrew rig, and so we're just boiling everything, killing everything, and then we clean our tanks well and steam them. So it can be killed, but if you have a plastic homebrew fermenter, chances are you should just make that one your wild one and use the Brett and other organisms in there.
Okay, so when you say proper CIP. One of the ones that I work with frequently on the pro scale, their CIP is literally, dump in PBW at a normal temperature, 130 degrees ish, and recirculate with a CIP rig. Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about something more intensive?
No, that's really it. For anyone who's not spent time in a professional brewery, CIP stands for clean in place, and it just means your spray ball inside your tank that you hook up to a pump and spin it so you can get mechanical action. The way you clean things is amount of chemical used, temperature of the chemical, how long it was in contact, and the mechanical action. So, soaking is fine, but if you have a spray ball that hits it, it's going to clean things better. So all those parameters are how you clean stuff. So I could have easily just said sanitizing your homebrew rig or homebrew fermenters or whatever. Same thing. Oh, cleaning first, sanitize second. Same thing as you're experiencing.
Okay. Yeah, that's I wanted to make sure of. It's very possible that there could have been something special that you should do because because Brett's intense sometimes. So
you certainly don't want it, but the good news is other yeast can also outcompete it. So let's say you had a couple of cells of Brettanomyces or something that got infected. It can certainly grow, but if you have something like Callao yeast that you did on your next ferment, it's going to outcompete it and be fine. So I think the best thing you can do is if your stuff is inexpensive, just have one for wild and one separately. We just weren't going to have two separate breweries is our thing, and it works for us.
No, I totally. On your scale, I totally get it. In my scale, because I've been considering once I have my brewery back up and running, doing sours and Brett and experimenting with those kinds of things. Just going to grab another carboy, and dedicate it just right on it, Brett, in permanent marker and just have that be my, like you said, the wild program, if you will.
Yep.
And just seems easier.
That's the safest way to do it for sure.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So,
that's good advice.
Yeah, misconceptions.
The biggest thing is you shouldn't be afraid of ruining your whole brewery forever and ever, and because, like I said, it can be killed with the proper practices. Don't fear the Brett.
So, this, by the way, super tasty. I'm not sure I'm getting all the different notes in it. Oddly, the one thing I think I'm missing is the dulce de leche, but I definitely get a little bit of... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, would you repeat everything that was in it? I forget all the numerous things.
I will. It's double barrel aged imperial stout with Blanchard's coffee, cinnamon, dulce de leche, cacao nibs, and Ghirardelli dark chocolate. And so I'm definitely getting cacao / dark chocolate, cinnamon, and coffee. But I'm not sure I'm getting the dulce de leche, which should be like kind of a lactose milk character to it.
Yeah.
But that may just be coming through in body and mouthfeel, which this is definitely a fuller body stout. It's not a dry stout by any stretch of the mind. So, but actually, interesting question for you, Matt. So, stouts tend to come in dry stout and full-bodied or milk stout. Does one take to a barrel better than the other?
It's my opinion. I think several people agree with me, but I'm sure there are a million opinions on this. But I think the beers that go into spirits barrels, your bourbons and rums and things like that, brandy, maybe not brandy, but bourbon for sure, need to have a pretty big body to them. And the reason for that, in my mind, is because the booziness, the alcohol that comes from the bourbon barrel, as well as the char that's in there, as well as the oak, which provides some tannins. There's some flavors which tend to sort of dry out the palate on the mouthfeel. And if you put a lower gravity beer, like a dry stout or something like that, I think it further compounds it to just taste kind of sort of just dry and flabby a little bit. And I think you need a little bit of sweetness to stand up to the booziness that's added from that bourbon barrel aging. And so my favorite ones are things that I ferment a little less. Right? I purposely try to finish them with a little higher finishing gravity. And it's part of the reason our sort of flagship bourbon barrel aged beer is an imperial milk stout. Add a bunch of lactose, add a bunch of oats to it as well. And I just think that body goes better with the character that's coming from aging than would a dry beer.
Totally on board with that.
Yeah, I can get on board with that too.
For all the reasons that you just said. It just like it adds depth to the beer, and you'll be left with a nice balance that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, I've got a Scotch ale in the tank right now that's headed for bourbon barrels, and it's due out about a year from right now. And I'm afraid because it fermented a little lower than expected, and I'm kind of tasting, it tastes great right now, but I think it's a little lower than I would have wanted it in the barrel. But you don't really want to stop that fermentation, or you can't really. And so it's just going to be what it's going to be. But I've got barrels I can blend in a few things that are of higher gravity to make the finished product a little better.
Sure. I don't know if I'm getting into trade secrets here. If I am, just feel free to stop me.
Totally fine.
But when you talk about leaving it a little high before it goes into a barrel, are we talking 1020, 1030?
Let me do a little bit of. I typically use Play-Doh, so 1020 is going to be around 5 Play-Doh. No, it would. So our imperial stout, our imperial milk stout finishes around 8 Play-Doh, so that's like 1032.
Okay.
Somewhere in
wow,
that.
that's really high. Okay.
Yeah, it is. And I've got another one that. Paulie?
What you said you ended at 10:30. What was your OG?
The OG on that one was 25 Play-Doh, so whatever that is, time 1.1.
1.1.
1.1. We made another one that was 31 Play-Doh. We just wanted to see how high we could get it, and it's right now sitting at 14 Play-Doh. So it's way too sweet of a beer. But I think when you use it as a blend, when you get that booziness from the alcohol, like in the end, it'll be okay by itself. It's too sweet right now. So definitely think higher